بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه صدق الله العظيم. Previously we talked a little bit about Surah Al Baqarah and we mentioned some introductory points about this surah, briefly going over them. To begin with, this surah is called Surah Al Baqarah. Now, we mentioned earlier, before we started the Tafseer of Surah Al Fatiha, that the name to each surah, just like you have Fatiha, just like you have Baqarah, just like you have Al Imran, just like you have Surah Maryam, just like you have Surah Bani Israel, all the names to these surahs, the names of these surahs were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ just the same way the surah itself was revealed. The name of the surah was also revealed to the Prophet ﷺ just like the surah itself was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, the order in which we see the Quran today. We know that the first revelation was Iqra Bismi, the first 5 verses. But is that all the way in the beginning? No. We open with Fatiha, and then there's Baqarah, and then there's Al Imran. So this tartib, or this order that we see it now, this was also, Rasulullah was commanded to put this surah here, and to put this surah after this one, to put this surah after this one. Right? And number 3 is that the name of these surahs, they're not trying to say, or they're not telling us what's discussed in the surah only. The name of the surah is only and only for reference. For example, Surah Al Baqarah, this Baqarah actually means cow, so it doesn't mean that the surah will discuss about the cow and how much it weighs and how much milk it produces and how many offsprings it has at once. All that's not discussed. In fact, there are only, in this very lengthy surah, there are about 4 or 5 verses that are talking about the Baqarah. And that meant in referring to the story of Musa alayhi salam's time, when someone was killed and then they didn't know who the killer was. So there's only 4 or 5 verses in which Baqarah is mentioned. There's hundreds and thousands of topics that are discussed in Surah Al Baqarah. Maybe the smaller surahs, the topic or the name of the surah is in line with whatever is being discussed in the surah. For example, Surah Al Talaq, right? All the surah mentioned is rules about talaq and divorce. But Baqarah is not mentioned throughout the surah. In fact, only 4 or 5 verses. Surah Al Baqarah, we said, it is the lengthiest surah of the Quran. In Surah Al Baqarah lies the lengthiest verse also of the Quran. The lengthiest verse is also found in Surah Al Baqarah. Also, Surah Al Baqarah is Madaniyah, meaning it was revealed after the Prophet ﷺ made hijrah towards Medina. Even though there are some verses of the Quran that were revealed in Mecca when the Prophet ﷺ made Hajjat al-Wada', when he came back to make his Hajj. And we explained this concept last week, that you have some surah that's Madaniyah and some Makkiyah. What is the difference? If that particular surah was revealed before the Prophet made hijrah towards Medina, it was considered Makkiyah. Even though some verses may be revealed elsewhere. And if this surah was revealed after the Prophet made hijrah towards Medina, it's considered Madaniyah, even though the Prophet ﷺ came back to Mecca and some verses were revealed in Mecca. Yeah? Also, another thing we said was that one verse in Surah Al-Fatiha, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. This surah also has the virtue that the last ever revelation is also found in Surah Al Baqarah. From those surahs that are considered Madaniyah, those that were revealed after the Prophet migrated towards Medina, Surah Al Baqarah was the first one out of the Madaniyah surahs. Then we talked a little bit about the virtues of Surah Al Baqarah. Basically, the surah is meant to protect someone, protect someone's wealth, protect someone from shayateen, protect someone from jinn. There are many narrations. Rasulullah ﷺ says that for in the house in which Surah Al Baqarah is recited, or Surah Al Baqarah was ever recited, that house will be saved from the effect of jinn or black magic. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh said that there's 10 verses in Surah Al Baqarah. If these 10 verses were to be recited on someone that has any sort of effect, or those 10 verses are recited just in the house itself, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would protect that person, protect the people in the house, and protect the house itself. Those 10 verses are, number one, the first four verses of Surah Al Baqarah. The first four of Surah Al Baqarah, then the middle two of Surah Al Baqarah, which is basically Ayatul Kursi and two verses after it, three verses. And the last two verses of Surah Al Baqarah, from Amin al-Rasul all the way till the end. These 10 ayat Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was referring to. Just like Surah Al-Fatiha has many different names, we mention one name besides Baqarah for this surah, and that is Sanamul Quran. Sanam means the pinnacle of something. So the pinnacle of Quran is Surah Al-Baqarah. And Mufassirin give many different reasons why this surah is considered the pinnacle of the Quran. Number one, simply because it's the lengthiest. Many things are discussed in this Quran. In fact, Ibn Arabi rahimahullah said that there's 1,000 ahkam in this Quran, there's 1,000 prohibitions in this surah, there's 1,000 ayat pertaining to wisdom, and there's 1,000 historical events in this surah. So this is Surah Al-Baqarah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif Lam Mim. Dhalika al-kitab wa la rayba fih. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off with Alif Lam Mim. Now these or such like verses in the Quran, Alif Lam Mim, Ha Mim, Taha, Yasin, Tasin, Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad, all of these ayat or verses are called muqatta'at. They're called huruf al-muqatta'at. Muqatta'at actually means they're broken up into pieces, or they're isolated. For example, we don't say for Alif Lam Mim Alam. We say each letter separately. We say Alif by itself, we say Lam by itself, and we say Mim by itself. So they're isolated, they're broken up into parts. Also, they don't have any vowels on them, any harakat, fatha, dhamma, kasra, they're free of that. So these are called huruf muqatta'at. What does the muqatta'at mean? Or over here, Alif Lam Mim, what does it mean? There's two groups of scholars. The earlier scholars, they used to do something called tafweed ilallah. Meaning they used to say, we don't know the meaning, Allah knows best what the meaning of this is. The later scholars would tend to give such a tafseer or such an explanation of the verse that it is meant to show the reader the beauty of the Quran in a way that it doesn't go against anything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason they would do this is because in the beginning, about I would say 300 Hijriya or 400 Hijriya, when Islam was spreading throughout the different countries, the Greek methodology was also coming into Islam. It was creeping into Islam. And then they would say, what kind of Quran has been revealed to you, O Muslims, that you don't even know what the first verse in Surah Al Baqarah means? So, to counter that, Mufassirin would give such an explanation. Number one, they would never say this is what Allah means, because no one knows what Allah is referring to. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So they would give different definitions. Alif Lam Mim, for example, according to some scholars, the Alif stands for Allah. The Lam stands for Jibreel. And the Mim stands for Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. According to some scholars, the Alif means Awwal. And the Lam means Lazim. And Mim means Mu'mineen. Meaning the first thing that is Lazim, that is necessary for the believer, is that he believes in the things that are mentioned after. الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ, and then they believe in the Quran and the previous books. So there's many different interpretations that Mufassirin give. However, no one can for sure say that this is what Allah is referring to. No one can say this for sure. This is only, and this is the test for ulama. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the very beginning, He tests the ulama by saying, because Rasulullah he says in one hadith that manhumani la yashba'an. There are two types of people. They are blessed with such a blessing that they can never get enough of it. منهوم في العلم لا يشبع منه ومفهوم في الدنيا لا يشبع منها. One is a person that's blessed with ilm and knowledge, and he cannot stop himself from learning more. Wherever he sees a new book, he's going to jump on that book. And he wants to read the whole book. So one is that person who he's drowned himself in knowledge. He can never get enough of it. And there's another person who is drowned in the love for this dunya, and he will also never get enough of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over here tells the scholars, or tells those people that like to jump into things, that over here I want you to jump into everything besides these verses. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Kahf, He says about the people of the cave. How many were there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they will ask you, O Muhammad. This is something from the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to give a firm definition or the firm meaning of what these huruf al-muqatta'at mean, that is not permissible. Also, we said previously that to know everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran makes this distinction between Himself and His creation by putting such verses in the Quran that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the meaning to them. For example, Alif Lam Mim, Ha Mim, Taha, all these, no one knows the meaning to. Does the Prophet ﷺ know the meaning to those? There's a difference of opinion. Some say the Prophet ﷺ knew the meanings and Rasul ﷺ was ordered to keep it as a secret from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some say even the Prophet ﷺ was not aware of the meaning of these huruf al-muqatta'at. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this distinction because knowing everything is the sifa and quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alim, He knows everything. And to know something and not to know the other thing, that is the quality of the creation. They know some things and they lack education or knowledge in other things. Imam Malik rahimahullah was asked, some people came from Yemen to visit Imam Malik in Medina. They asked him 36 questions. Out of the 36 questions, Imam Malik only knew the answer to 4 questions. And they asked him another 5th question, he said, I don't know. The 6th one, I don't know. 7th one, I don't know. So he said that you're considered such a big scholar and you don't know the answer to the rest of the questions. 32 of the questions. So Imam Malik rahimahullah, he gives such a response. He gave the hadith, Rasulullah says, إِنَّ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ أَن تَقُولَ لِمَا لَا تَعْلَمْ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. This is also a part of knowledge, that you say Allah knows best in those affairs or matters that you don't know anything. Imam Abu Hanifa was asked once, someone came to him and he asked him that, can you tell me exactly what happened between the Sahaba? You know, they had some arguments, some quarrels, some fights. What exactly happened between the Sahaba? So Abu Hanifa says, was I there that you're asking me? Was I there that you're asking me? Right? To tell him that it doesn't really make a difference whether you know or not what exactly happened about the Sahaba. Those were big people. How can a person that is lesser than him in status make a judgment or pass a judgment for those that are above him? So there's some things that we jump into and some things we abstain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches everyone a lesson here. Also He gives a distinction between Himself and the creation. Alif Lam Mim comes under mutashabihat. Does anyone know what mutashabihat means? No.
Tashbih.
Okay, but what is tashbih when it comes to as a term in tafseer basically?
Giving an example.
That's an Urdu tashbih. Also in Arabic tashbih means to give an example, but mutashabih. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in the beginning of Ali Imran He says, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن الكتاب وأخرى متشابهات. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the verses of the Quran into 2 categories. Number 1, He says muhkamat. And Allah says these are the actual thing of the Quran, the essence of the Quran. Kitab. Muhkamat are those clear rules of the Quran. Do this, don't do this, this is how it's done. These are muhkamat. And وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَات, and the second type is mutashabihat, those of which the meaning is not known to people. Now, pay attention to this. There's 2 types of mutashabihat. Number 1 are those verses that the word itself is not even used in Arabic. It's not known to anyone. For example, Alif Lam Mim. No one ever heard of it. Does it have a meaning? Does it not have a meaning? We don't know. The second type of mutashabihat are those words that they do have a meaning, but the meaning that Allah is referring to, we have no idea. Example of that is Allah in the Quran, He talks about His hand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about His face. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about His shin. يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ وَيُدْعَوْنَ إِلَى السُّجُودِ وَهُمْ سَالِمُونَ. The day when the shin is revealed, meaning Allah's shin, and people are asked to make sajda to Him on the day of judgment. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically everyone will make sajda and ruku to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except those people that were not in a habit to prostrate in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya. Allah, Rasul says also in Surah Al Mursalat, in the end, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ ارْكَعُوا لَا يَرْكَعُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell everyone to make ruku in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people will not be able to make ruku. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ says that if they were not in a habit of praying their salah in this dunya, Allah will put a metal rod in their back. Everyone will make ruku except for those people that have that rod in the back. So وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ ارْكَعُوا لَا يَرْكَعُونَ. So يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ. Allah talks about His own shin. Allah talks about His own face in Surah Al-Rahman. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. Everyone on top of this dunya, fan. Coming from fani. In Urdu we say fani hona, to finish. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. And only the face of your Lord will remain. So wajh and yad and shin, we know the meaning. We know what these body parts are. But what does Allah mean when He's referring it to Himself? We have no idea. Because Allah says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. There's nothing like Allah. How is that shin? We have no idea. How is that face? We have no idea. How is the hand? We have no idea. So in these mutashabihat, there's two types of scholars, like I said. Those that say Allah knows best and they leave it to that. Majority of the muhaddithin, the experts of hadith, they prefer to leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't get into the discussion. And the others, they make appropriate ta'weel or interpretation to that verse. There's one scholar by the name of Imam Bayhaqi. He has written Sunan al-Bayhaqi. He has written another book called Kitab al-Asma'i was-Sifat. Kitab al-Asma'i was-Sifat, in which he argues that we are only to leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not permissible that we even try to give a valid interpretation to these verses. Upon this book, a famous scholar passed away not too long ago, about 100 years ago, whose name was Allama Zahid al-Kawthari, al-Misri, al-Hanafi. This was one of the last Shaykh al-Islam of his time. You know, when the Khilafah was in Turkey, we had the Khilafah Uthmaniyah. The last Shaykh al-Islam was a post that was given to a scholar that would have final say in all affairs. And the Khalifa would consult him. If he passed a judgment, it would go for the rest of the Islamic countries as a rule of the Islamic State. So he writes a very extensive hashiyah and a commentary on his book, when he straightens Imam Bayhaqi out and he says that this is where you went wrong, this is where you went wrong, and this is the way. You know, sometimes when you have a book and you read the commentary to that book, and if the commentary is more than the book itself, there is more taste and it feels more better to go to that book, because he takes them by the ear and says, you went wrong here, this is what it's supposed to be, this is where it's supposed to be. That's why there's one book that's very famous in Balagha al-Arabiya, in Arabic rhetoric, called Mukhtasar al-Ma'ani. This book is one of the scariest books to study, because you simply can't understand the book. He uses so much philosophy and so much logic in that book, you can't understand that book. And if you look at the actual text was actually maybe about 20 pages. But he brings a book to explain that book in about 500 pages. Right? Same thing with Al-Hidayah, the famous Hanafi fiqh book. The Sharaf wa Fath al-Qadir is in like 8 volumes. Much more than that of the book. So you find a lot, it's really good to there's one book called Tanweer al-Absar. Book is about maybe 20 pages. Tanweer al-Absar by Alauddin Haskafi, rahimahullah. One scholar looked at his book and he said, I'm going to make the sharah and commentary upon his book. And he wrote a very extensive sharah upon his book and he called it Ad-Durrul Mukhtar. Then Allama ibn Abidin Shami came and he said, I'm going to make a commentary on this book. And he called it Raddul Muhtar. So it's really fun to see when a scholar that knows more, he says that this is where he went wrong and this was the reason and this is what it's supposed to be. So this is exactly what happened on the book of Imam Bayhaqi in Kitab al-Asma'i wa Sifat, that Allama Zahid al-Kawthari al-Hanafi, he made a very, very nice sharah and a commentary upon his book, proving that it is permissible for one to give a proper and appropriate ta'weel or interpretation to these verses. Sometimes we know that, as Rasulullah ﷺ says in one hadith, that there are some students that they hear something from the teacher and they are able to preserve it, or they know it better than their own teachers that taught it to them. Rasulullah ﷺ said sometimes sometimes the person that's hearing it or receiving knowledge is able to preserve it more better than that of his teacher. That's why Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, he had thousands of teachers. But we barely hear of his teacher's name. We hear of Bukhari, because he went way ahead of his student. The same thing goes with these books, that one person comes later on, he's more knowledgeable than that of the one who wrote the book. I'll end off with one story. In fact, two stories. One other came to mind. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahimahullah, the famous faqih, the famous jurist, the famous muhaddith, he has his own book of hadith, Musnad Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. He and his friend, who was also a muhaddith, a very great hadith expert by the name of Yahya ibn Ma'in. These two were in some other country and they made a plan that they were going to go travel a month's distance and they're going to go to make Hajj. And after they perform their Hajj, they're going to go all the way to Yemen, all the way to the south, to benefit from another hadith expert, Abdul Razzaq. So they made this plan that we're going to go perform Hajj, and after Hajj we're going to go all the way to Sana'a, Yemen, to benefit from this muhaddith. So anyways, they both go to perform their Hajj, and now they're making the tawaf. His partner or his friend, Yahya ibn Ma'in, he quickly came to Ahmad bin Hanbal and he said, there's good news. So Imam Ahmad says, what happened? He said that when I was making tawaf, of course now when you make tawaf in Hajj time, there's millions of people, so thousands of people there. Of course there was not as many people back in the days, maybe 1,000 or maybe a couple hundred people at that time making tawaf. So he said that when I was making tawaf, I met Abdul Razak, he is here making Hajj this year. So now we don't have to go all the way to Yemen, we can benefit from him here. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal told him that I made the intention to Allah that I'm going to benefit from him in Yemen. So now we're going to wait here, we're going to wait until he reaches Yemen, and now we're going to travel all the way to Yemen to benefit from him. So this is the thirst that some people have for knowledge, that the distance would not matter to them. And his friend told him that you're going to spend a month going and a month coming back, and all the expense that you're going to have to give just to get there and back. In fact, when he came back, one scholar, he says that when he came back, he actually came back to Mecca again. He was pale and he was very weak and he was very, very sick, because he had lost his money when he was going towards Yemen. In fact, Yahya ibn Ma'in, his partner, said that for a couple of days, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, because he lost his money was finished, he would, one of those people that help load the bags on the truck or on the ride, they have a special word for it? That's Urdu. But anyways, that's what he did for a couple of days. He helped people load their luggage on the animal, just for some money to get by. So when he came back, they told him that, Abdul Razak was making Hajj. You could have benefited from him here. So he said that the hardships we faced was nothing in comparison to the amount we benefited from Abdul Razak. So these are people that travel for a couple of hadith and they travel the distance. There's another very famous, but a very, very nice incident about a student of knowledge, and he was very, very smart. He would make sure every book he sees, he would read the entire thing. The entire book, cover to cover, he would read. So once he saw one book, and he read it, and he was so moved by that book, he was so affected by the book, that he began to cry after he read the book. And he was crying because he wanted to meet the author of the book, and he wanted to benefit from him. His name was Mir Sayyid Jurjani, from Jurjan. So Mir Sayyid read this book, and he was crying after he read it. So one person that was walking by, he said that, "Why are you crying?" He said that, "I want to meet the author of this book. I don't know who the author is." So he said, "He is all the way in Jurjan. He's still alive. And I benefited from him. I read from him a couple of years back." Now, before I go on with the rest of the story, this was something that a lot of the people would do at that time. What they would do is that if they read any book and the author of that book was alive, they would try their best to travel to the author and read the book from him himself, the person who wrote the book. So he said, "The guy is in Jurjan, he's still alive, you might as well go benefit from him now, he's extremely old." So this guy, he gets all his luggage together and he travels the distance, hundreds and thousands of miles. And finally, when he gets to his name was Qutbuddin, who wrote the book. He gets to Qutbuddin and he said that, "Here's your book. I'm very affected, I'm very moved by this book. I want you personally to teach me this book." Now Qutbuddin was so old at that time that his eyelashes were covering his eyes, and he was very weak, and he was hunchbacked, and he said that, "You're coming to me now when my legs are in the grave. You're trying to benefit from me now when I have no power in my lectures. Everything is gone." So he said that, I'll tell you where one of my student is. He's in Yemen, and everything he knows is exactly what I know. I taught him everything. So you should go benefit from him. And he said, "Give me a piece of paper, I'm going to write a letter for you, a recommendation letter." So he writes in a letter that this Mir Sayyid student has come from so far. He's a very bright student, very smart student. Teach him very nicely. So anyways, now imagine he takes that letter, and now he goes off another couple hundred miles to benefit from his student. Mubarak Shah was his name, in Yemen. He goes to Mubarak Shah and he says, "Read this letter, it's from your teacher." So he reads the letter and he finds that the letter is actually from his teacher, and the teacher's stamp is there. So he gets so happy that this is from his teacher. He takes the letter and he kisses the letter and he puts it on his eyes. My teacher, who's so old, wrote me a letter. Anyways, he said that you are allowed to sit in my class with 2 conditions. He said, "What are the 2 conditions?" He said, "Number 1, because you came late. Because you came late, there's going to be a penalty. You're going to have to give 1 dinar to me every single day in class. You have to give me 1 dinar because of coming late. Now you're going to have more questions because you came late. Now I have to sit there and spend more time for you. So every day you come to class, you're going to give me 1 dinar. So he said, "That's not hard. I'm going to work at night time." So he would earn 2 dirhams, he would use 1 for himself, and he would next day in the morning, he would give it to his teacher. Look at the zeal that they had for knowledge, to benefit from teachers and from ulama. He says, "Okay, the first condition is very easy. What's the second one?" He said, "Second one is that you can never ask me any questions. You're going to sit all the way in the back of the class." Now we know who sits in the back of the class: those that don't like to study. Right? If you don't want to study, you don't want to be in the teacher's eye, you're going to sit all the way in the back. Those that want to study, they're going to sit right in front of the teacher. There was, this is off topic, but there was, in South Africa, in the madrasa I was studying in, there was these very smart kids. They would sit in the front. One of them was extremely, extremely smart. He actually came late to join the year, but because he was so smart, he asked the teacher that, I want to benefit, let me sit in the front. Anyways, he sat in the front. Now the rule of that teacher was that every time he came to give the lecture on the hadith, he said that every student should have a turban on his head. That was the condition. You don't have the turban, you're going to be standing outside. So he came late to class that day and he didn't have a turban. He was worried that teacher's going to walk in any second. So his buddy next to him, he had a very long turban. So he says that you take it around your head a couple of times and then pass it to me, the same turban. What actually happened was when the teacher came to class, because he was the brightest one of the class, he said, you know what, take this paper and we'll give it to the office. The problem was now you had to take the turban off. So anyways, the scholar, Mubarak Shah said to Mir Sayyid, who was traveling for him, he said that two conditions. Number one, you give me dinar every day. And number two, you sit all the way in the back of the class and you can't ask me any questions because you came late, right? And if you came early, only those people are allowed to ask questions that came early to class because they already know what's going on in the book. So anyways, that's why some scholars say that if you miss, of course not if you're studying ilm, if you miss one dars, if you miss one class, then you will see the effect of that one class for 40 days. Of not attending that class. And I personally remember that I missed 2 days of the beginning classes of Nahwa and Arabic grammar. Those chapters that were talked about when I wasn't there, I never had any idea of those chapters until I got to my 5th year. And this was baby stuff that people already know. So anyways, he says that you're going to sit all the way in the back of the classroom. He said, fine. So anyways, many days passed, the teacher would teach the lesson, the students would write their notes, and they would go to their dormitories, the area where the students would reside. The teacher, Mubarak Shah, he decided that one night, in the middle of the night, he's just going to go around the student dormitories and see what everyone's up to. Does anyone need help? Is anyone being bothered? Which a scholar should do or a teacher should do. Always see if anything is wrong with the students, if they need extra help or whatever the case may be. So that night he goes in the middle of the night and he's going to the dormitories and it's the middle of the night, so everyone is asleep. And he notices that there's one room in which the light is on. So he goes closer to that room and he hears a bunch of people talking. One guy is saying that this is what I read in the book. And then you hear one guy saying that this is what the teacher explained. So now he gets very happy, so he goes by the door and he sees that that's only one person, the Mir Sayyid. He's the only one that's awake at night and he's studying. Everyone is asleep. And there were so many voices, he thought there were many people discussing or studying the next day's lesson or the previous lesson. He thought there were more people, but there's only one person. And this is what he's saying. This is what he hears. He says 4 sentences. He says, this is what was mentioned in the text, the book. This is what the commentator said about the text, explaining the text. This is what the teacher gave as a commentary on the commentary of the text. And this is what I say. He had so much knowledge that he passed his teacher and he said, after all 3, this is what the main text said, this is what the first commentary said, this is what the teacher said on the commentary, and this is what I say. Mu'arrikheen mention, historians mention that رَقَصَ بَهْجَةً وَسُرُورًا. He was so moved, he was so happy that he has a student like this, that he passed his teacher, the only one awake at night, that he's saying that this is what the teacher said, and finally this is what I said. So next day in the morning, when it was class and all the people came to class, he called them from the back. He says, Mir Sayyid, you come here, you're going to sit in the front. Now you're the only person that can ask questions. No one can ask questions besides you. Because no one can maybe understand as much as he understands. Then when the dars was completed, was over, before he was leaving, all the dirhams that he gave him as a penalty for coming late, the teacher gave it all to him and he gave him double and more than that. And he said, this is for you. So sometimes the student even passes the teacher. This is what I was mentioning. Also we see from this the thirst of knowledge that people would have. Inshallah, next time we'll go inshallah into Alif Lam Mim and the ayahs after. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq.